Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about a really powerful idea in learning. Your brain doesn't just store information, it connects it. We're going to explore something called a connection web, and it's really the key to making what you learn actually stick.
So think about it like this. Your memory is not like a file in a single folder on a computer. With a folder, if you forget that one specific path to get to it, that information can feel totally lost. Instead, your brain works much more like a web. A single idea is connected to lots of other ideas, and that creates multiple pathways. So even if one path is a little weak, you have several other routes to get you back to what you're trying to remember.
To really make this idea click, we're going to work through some questions together. So if you have your workbook, go ahead and open it up to lesson 6.4. As we go through these ideas, you'll get a chance to write down your own thoughts, and then later on, build your very own connection web.
Okay, let's start with this big idea. When we say memory is a web and not a folder, what does that actually mean to you? How would you explain that difference in your own words?
Well, the really important difference is that a web gives you multiple paths to get back to an idea, through examples or stories or things from your own life. A folder just gives you one way in. So the more connections you build, the more ways you have to remember.
So why is it that connected information is so much stickier than just a random, isolated fact? I mean, think about it. It's way easier to remember a cousin's birthday than some random date from a history textbook, right? One of those has meaning and connections. The other is just floating out there by itself.
It really comes down to this. Connected information has meaning. An isolated fact is kind of like a leaf blowing in the wind. But when you connect a new fact to something you already know, your brain can hook it into your existing memory, and that makes it so much easier to store and, more importantly, to find later on. Go ahead and take a moment to capture that idea.
And we've all been here, right? You're trying to learn something totally new, something you have zero background knowledge on. What does that actually feel like when you're trying to make it stick?
It just feels like the information won't stick, doesn't it? Like it slips away almost as fast as you read it. And that's because your brain has nothing to grab onto. It's kind of like trying to hang a picture on a smooth wall with no nail. If you want, you can pause here and describe that feeling in your own words. Okay, so let's get practical. How does all of this actually help you when you're sitting down for a test? This is where that web really shows its strength. How do these connections help you pull up information faster when the clock is ticking?
During a test, you don't have time to search around in your brain forever. Connections act like mental shortcuts. So if you suddenly blank on a definition, your brain can jump to an example you remember or a story you heard, and that can lead you right back to the answer. It gives you multiple entry points, which makes your recall faster and way more reliable under pressure.
So if learning is all about creating these pathways in our brain, how do we make them stronger? How do we turn, a faint little trail in our memory into a superhighway?
It's actually pretty simple. A pathway gets stronger the more you use it. Every single time you recall something or try to explain it to a friend or build a new connection to it, you are reinforcing that route. Each time you use it, you make it stronger and faster for the next time. Let's pause for a moment so you can get that down.
Now, one of the best ways to build strong connections is to link whatever you're learning to the real world. So why is that so helpful? Why does connecting a concept to an example, a story, or a personal experience work so well?
It's because real life adds meaning, and it often adds emotion. Your brain is literally wired to remember stories way better than it remembers abstract definitions. When a concept connects to a real moment, it just becomes more memorable. It helps you understand why it even matters. Go ahead and take a moment to capture that thought. So, how do you know when you've actually done it? What's a clear sign that you've built a strong connection web for a topic and that you really, truly get it?
Here are a few really good signs. One is that you can explain it easily in your own words. Another is that you can come up with examples really quickly. Or maybe you can see how it connects to other topics you're learning. And here's my favorite. If you forget a small detail, you can actually reason your way back to the answer using the connections you've built. Pick one of those that makes sense to you and go ahead and jot it down.
All right, now for a really powerful idea for studying, think about those times you hit a wall and you just feel stuck. How can this whole idea of making connections become a pivot strategy to get you unstuck?
When you're stuck, just rereading the same sentence over and over is a pretty weak approach.
A pivot strategy means you totally change what you're doing. So instead of rereading, you pivot to asking active questions, like, what does this remind me of? Or where have I seen this before? This simple pivot turns that frustrating, stuck feeling into active, structured thinking. Take a second to write down how you might use that pivot.
All right, enough talking about it. Let's actually build one. In your workbook, you should see the Build a Connection Web section. It's a simple 3-step process. First, you'll choose one concept from any of your classes. Second, you'll make at least 5 connections to it using the prompts. And third, you'll write something called a bridge sentence to really lock in one of those connections.
First things first, pick your concept and write it in the center. Now, let's build the web out from there. Use these prompts to get you thinking. What does this remind you of? Where have you seen this in real life? What's a clear example of it? And maybe, what's a non-example? How does it connect to something you learned before? Go ahead and pause here and see how many of those you can fill out.
And now for what might be the most important step, the bridge sentence. It looks really simple. This connects to blank because blank. But this is where the magic happens. That little word because forces your brain to explain the exact link between two ideas. It solidifies the connection. Go ahead and write one bridge sentence for your web.
Excellent work. This connection web you just built is a really powerful tool, but it's just one tool in a bigger system. If you look at the Unit 6 wrap-up section, you'll see this technique picker. The goal here is to learn how to match the right tool to the right job. I mean, you wouldn't use a hammer to cut a piece of paper, right? In the same way, you might use the Leitner system for vocab, the Feynman technique for explaining concepts, and connection webs like we just did for understanding those big, confusing, abstract ideas.
And remember, knowing about the tool is one thing, but actually using it is what matters. The real learning happens when you schedule these techniques into your week and then take a moment to reflect on how they're actually working for you.
So that's your study toolbox for this unit. Leitner, Feynman, method of loci, and connection webs. When you start to build a system around these tools, you move beyond just studying, and you really start learning in a deeper, more effective way. Now go ahead and finish the lesson 6.4 page in your workbook and get ready to put all these ideas into practice.